What's up? You are now listening to Americanized, a storytelling podcast where you'll hear from eclectic first and second generation Americans share their stories and real life experiences as children of immigrants. Hey there, welcome back to another episode of Americanized. I'm your host Roslyn, and I'm so glad you're here, because in this episode, Fanny and I continue our conversation. We talk about singlehood and the specific experiences for women of color. We also talk about the systems in place that outline the trajectory of what we are told a successful life looks like, but we explore how we can rewrite that script, making it our own. Stay tuned. You did mention something that I want to touch on. I am 28 and I'm married, so I did want to hear, and you're also married, or what is the shared experience you're hearing from women about the pressure of singlehood for women over 30? And why do you think that is a thing altogether?
Well, I think that there's been this pressure of your clock is ticking. There is this irresponsibility with not prioritizing romance or prioritizing marriage after a certain age. I've decided that that certain age is 27. I feel like after you turn 27, all of a sudden everyone is up in arms about the fact that you are not partnered or on a very clear path towards marriage and children. You know, people will celebrate you for getting the degrees, for getting the accolades, for landing that job, all of those things. But if you're in your bag and doing your thing and eventually you're not trying to get married, then, well, what's wrong with you? And I think especially for women of color, and part of why a lot of the work that I do at Her Soul Supply is curated for single women of color, is because I think that there are specific things that are stacked up against us, right? The idea of not just how culture sees Black women in terms of our femininity, and you know what it means to be accessible as a partner, as an equal partner for a successful woman of color, and what that means when you want to be with a partner that can match you or can balance you in a way that feels uplifting and not like you're settling.
Mm-hmm. I hear that too a lot of the times. I'm curious if we can connect that to any systems in place and like why do we put this pressure on ourselves? I understand like the age for childbearing, geriatric pregnancies at 35 and plus, which seems like an extreme term to say geriatric, but that is, I guess, the medical term. I was talking to my cousin and we're kind of on the same wavelength as you're not on anybody else's timeline, and I think society and whoever else, other systems probably are putting us on this timeline where you do have to get married by 27, start having kids by 30, do this, and that. Or even like if you think about the school system, you have to graduate high school by 18 and start working in your early 20s. And that is all a system that they have us in. And now we have this pressure and these expectations. And if we're not meeting them, there's a bunch of turmoil and stress and anxiety and pain and suffering. So tell me more about what you found in that regard, or what your thoughts are.
So, I mean, I definitely think that there's a red carpet that gets rolled out for women to be on this very specific path, which I like to call the relationship escalator, right? Is that you go through courtship, you get engaged, you get married, you live together, you have children, and then you live happily ever after, right? Like these are the stories that we've been getting since the beginning of time in our Disney movies, watching growing up, and continues through our romantic comedies that we watch. Right. And so I think that there isn't really a soft place to land for women who are just not on that path for whatever reason, right? Maybe they were on the escalator and they fell off. They had a breakup, they had heartbreak, they were betrayed, they were hurt, or they haven't really found the opportunity to be themselves in a relationship, right? Some women just reject that and they're like, I don't want kids or I don't want marriage, and that should be okay, you know, and they're right. And so, I often think about like, okay, well, where are their role models? Who are their people? Where is their community? And what does that life look like in a way that doesn't center ongoing search for your person, right? We are social beings. We are meant to be in community. We are meant to be gathering. But I think that there is definitely this over indexing on romantic relationship being the one and only thing that's supposed to be fulfilling for you when you're a woman of a certain age. And I think that that's just the wrong message to be sending women. I think that we are more than our relationships, married or not.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Just as an individual woman, like there's a lot of power in being a woman, period.
Hmm. Exactly.
Yeah. And now I'm wondering, like, if these messages were sent to us by men. I don't think, like, I wonder, all these movies and the directors and the writers, like, I'm not sure, pretty sure all of them are not men or all women, but I'm curious what the
Yeah.
percentages are.
I mean, a lot of what I'm teaching and the work that I do is around helping women understand what patriarchy looks like in their lives. I think a lot of us understand the concept of patriarchy, but really it is ingrained in the way that we see the world, the way that we see ourselves, and the way that we see our value. And we assume that because, yeah, we don't necessarily put men on a pedestal, are there still ways that we behave in which we do, right? In which we decide that there are things that are not worth doing unless I have a partner with me, right? Like, you know, why not go on that bucket list trip? Why not invest in your wealth, right? Why do you have to buy a home with a romantic partner? What if you bought that home with your sister, with your best friend who has the same goal, who also wants to, you know, get a fixer upper, right? And so I think we don't allow ourselves to think expansively about that. I think the same happens with women who want children, who are just like waiting for their right partner to have their child. And yeah, what happens when you're not able to meet that person in time, right? What does single motherhood by choice look like? And why is that seen as such a terrible thing when the alternative is settling for someone who might not respect you just to have a baby, right? How is that supposed to be seen as a good choice for the modern day woman?
Mm-hmm. Wow. That's really good. Just like rewriting the script and, choosing what you want for your life. Which I imagine coming from our cultural backgrounds and having immigrant parents, I believe that, at least in my experience, they are very much by the book. These are the steps for, a successful life. This is what you have to do. We want to be proud. You're living for us. We're living vicariously through you. If you're not doing this, why did we bring you into this world, essentially? Is kind of, I
Yeah.
have African parents. Yeah, that's kind of what it is. Go to school, graduate, go to college, get a job, get married, have kids, take care of us when we get old. That's, I think, their mindset. How did you look beyond that or expand your mindset to get to where you are now? Coming from maybe a similar background, I'm kind of assuming, but you tell me.
Yeah, I mean, I think that because of what I experienced throughout my childhood, I think I really fought for my independence. And so I was very unapologetic by the time I was out of my parents' home about the way that I wanted to live my life. And I made it very clear that I will not be shamed or bullied about it. And so if you want me to be in contact with you, you want to be a part of my life, then you're going to have to respect me in the life that I've chosen. And children they're not owned, right? They're borrowed. Right? Like you raise your kids and then they become adults that get to take care of themselves, and you've done your job. And so I think that we need to be able to develop more advanced relationships with our family members because we are all forever growing and changing, right? And so that means that the nature of our relationships will forever grow and change. And so I think that being very unapologetic about the choices that I was making about my life and how different that was going to be from my parents was just a no-brainer for me. And I think that's a thing that a lot of women struggle with, in my practice, is the guilt of wanting something different from their mothers. But the reality is a lot has happened for women. A lot has happened for women between our generations, right? Like, I think it was the 1970s when women were finally able to have credit cards. Like before then, it had to be under a man's name or it was through his permission, right? Like so much has happened in terms of even just financial independence for women, right? Their ability to go to college, their ability to really advance in certain ways and see options for their future that doesn't have to depend on marriage. And I think that for a lot of grandmothers and on older aunties and older generations, they struggle to understand all of the options that have changed since their generation. um, and why wouldn't you want your daughter to have every option that she could have, right? But there's something scary about change that sometimes we really veer away from.
Right, that is so good. And I'm repeating what you said because I've never heard this before, and it just changed my entire perspective. And like, I don't know, you're speaking right to me. I'm gonna repeat it because it was so good. Children are not owned, they're borrowed. Wow. Thank you for saying that. That that needs to be heard. Because it's so true. And and the guilt that comes with, okay, I want to be independent, I want to leave my home, I want to live my own life. Especially as an immigrant, a child of immigrants, or an immigrant daughter, or an eldest daughter. Yeah, you touched on it. That was perfect. That was so good. I just have to sit and think about
Mm-hmm.
it. Wow. I was talking about this too with friends. Like, the children that you have, they're not yours. You don't own them. They were given to you to raise them. You were entrusted with these children. So do your job and raise them well so that they can go off and live their lives. And I think what you said is really like concise, and yeah, I love that so much.
Yeah, yeah. Because I think the more that we can recognize that we don't actually, own people, I think that, we can recognize that people have free will. They have the freedom to really choose what their path is going to be. And I think that sometimes that's something that can feel like a hard lesson, especially for immigrant parents who, you know, have a very serious purpose for why they're doing what they're doing to give you a specific life, but that doesn't give them ownership of that life,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like you're
Yeah.
also being raised in a completely different culture.
Right, right, exactly. And I think knowing that and owning that statement can be freeing for both the parent and the child. Like, you don't own your child. They're going to make their choices, and you just hope they make the right choices because you raised them well. And, like, not that you're not responsible fully, but there's some freedom there, I think. And for the child, the adult child as well.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, it's perfect. I saw that on your website you have this thing called a village. I want you to tell me about your village. What is that? Who's in there, and what is it all about?
Yeah. The village is my virtual community that I have for her soul supply. So it is a hub, a central private hub for single women to connect, to talk about some of the things that they're going through as single women, to be able to experience support from each other, to also really get an early insight into some of the offerings that we have at Her Soul Supply, whether we're doing a new workshop or we're planning our retreat. People get early access to that, as well as, certain features like Ask a Therapist is something that I like to do every week in there. Um, and also just really create a space that will normalize the idea of single women getting together with each other, right? Not feeling like this oddball out of their friend group because everyone is either preoccupied with dating or in relationships and not really wanting to prioritize their friendships. And so this is really a space where, women can be reminded that they are the priority, and we can really focus on the things that you want to be learning about so that you can continue to live expansively.
That's so beautiful. And I just want to say thank you for your work. You are doing what needs to be done. I've heard so many stories from single women and friends, and I don't know, I want to say horror stories, like with their dating history or just the struggles to find somebody when that's not the focus, right? Focus on yourself, your singlehood, and other women in that same bubble. So I'm not single, but I would be in your village if I was. I really appreciate that.
Well, thank you so much.
Before we close, I like to end the episodes asking guests what is their message to the listeners. If you could leave them with one thing.
So if I could leave your listeners with one thing, it is to remember that the world is always bigger than you think it is, right? I mean, so many of us feel like we are so pressured to live in our parents' image and do things exactly as they wish. And I think we need to remember that we can live expansively, that we can explore more, even within our own communities, outside of them. If you have the ability to get on a train or a bus or a plane, remember to do so. The world is big. And so to always take advantage of that.
Well, thank you for saying that. It is easy for us to get stuck in our ways or what we think is acceptable or putting ourselves in a mold and I totally agree. The world is much, much bigger than we think it is. Thank you so much, Fanny. Thank you for having the time, being on the show, sharing your wealth of knowledge, and just this is like a therapy session, I think, for both of us.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. Where can the listeners find you?
Yeah, so if you are in the New York, New Jersey, or Connecticut tri-state area, you can find me at restority.space. That's where you can learn about my offerings for eldest daughter, my psychotherapy offerings. You can also follow me on Instagram at restority.space. And if you are a single woman of color, you can follow me at Her Soul Supply. So that's also on Instagram and TikTok. And if you go to my website, hersoulsupply.com, there are plenty of resources where you can get started and start to tap into the community.
Thank you so much again. I'll be sure to share those links in the episode information. I really appreciate our time together. Thank you so much for listening. Hope to catch you in the next episode. All original music produced by Stubborn Soul. You can find him on all music listening platforms at STBRNSAL.